Hello, and welcome to the Journyx training webinar for version 9.0 new features. My name is Meredith Zakritz, and I'm the Director of Product Management here at Journyx, and I'll be walking you through the presentation today. We just have a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you need to adjust the size of your screen, the GoToMeeting panel includes a percent icon that will allow you to do this. And then I'll also be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So there is a question section in the GoTo panel, again, where you can submit your questions at any time during the presentation. So please feel free to use that. And I think that pretty much takes care of our housekeeping section. So we'll just go ahead and move on to the features, and then we'll save time for questions at the end. 9.0 was focused primarily on custom role improvements. So specifically around the use cases for what we call group administrators, and the idea of breaking out abilities so that certain accounts could do most of what you're used to your system administrators being able to do, but they would be able to do it for specific groups rather than for the system as a whole. And so a lot of the development effort for 9.0 was focused on this particular area. There were also some miscellaneous improvements, some login information in the system reports, email notifications, some additional imports, and then also a prototype of a UI improvement and some options that will be coming in the next version of 9. So we'll take a look at those today. So first of all, let's go ahead and take a look at our custom roles and the area that we spent most of our time improving for 9.0. Go to our logged in here as our administrator. And first and foremost, as part of this effort, we reworked the UI in this area, the user interface, so that it now is more consistent with what you're used to seeing on your management screens. So if we take a look at, this is the new UI in 9.0, we can also take a look at what it used to look like here, with our default roles listed on the top, scrolling to see what was part of those, etc. Your custom roles were listed below. Any changes you made here were made to all of the roles at the same time, and then your create was at the foot. And there were certain features that were lacking. But if we go back to the new UI, now it looks more like what you're probably used to seeing on your other management screens, where you can click through, for example, on the name to edit a role. All of the default and custom roles are listed in the same area. You can sort them by type here. You also have a hover, which allows you to take a look at what each role contains. So rather than scrolling, you can see the entire list before you click through to make any modifications. And then you also have the option to now copy your roles. So I can select an existing role and use those settings to create a new role if I wanted to make a slight change from one of my existing roles. So all of these things are new in the UI. You'll also notice that the way the list is handled, you have the total list of abilities and then the ones that you've added to the role here on the right. And so again, this mimics what you're used to seeing in report modification and other management screens. So all of this should look a little more familiar, a little more standard compared to the old roles UI. So moving past the UI changes, what we have done for 9.0 to accommodate this group administrator role is add and break out a lot of abilities that were previously either combined into one or just didn't exist at all, and so couldn't be granted to anybody except for a system administrator. And so they're all generally listed here on the left-hand side, and we're going to look at the screens themselves, the abilities that they grant as we walk through them. But you'll see some new ones here, such as the custom field, create, delete, modify, and they all follow this pattern: entry, column, to create, delete, modify, and so on. So we'll walk through each of those new abilities one by one just to see how the views differ for a system administrator versus a group administrator. So we'll start by taking a look at the group management abilities. It's fine. So we've got a group create, delete, modify. And on my left-hand side here is my group administrator. So this is somebody that I have set up to only belong to a specific group, but she has some of the system administrator abilities, including group management. Now, if we go back to our administrator and look at what our administrator can see, that the administrator sees more groups, or all of the groups in the system. Our group administrator only sees the group that she belongs to. And should she choose to modify this group, again, she'll only see the items that are in her groups. So if she were in, say, 3 groups, she could see all of the users in those 3 groups, but she does not have the option to grab users or projects or activities from any other groups, just the ones that she belongs to. But she can now manage her own groups. Another ability that was added is entry screen management. And I should mention, in case you're trying to take notes, there is an upgrader's guide that walks you through each and every one of these. I'll have the link at the end of the session, so you don't have to take detailed notes about how to get to these various abilities. It will be included in your upgrader's guide that you can use. So my group administrator now has abilities for entry screen management. And as we can see, she has the create ability, she has the edit ability because she can click on the names, and she has the delete ability. Now, these are not group scoped. She can see all of the entry screens available in the system. So this is where it might be worth deciding if you want to give your group admins all 3 abilities. For example, I might just want my group admin to have the create ability, but perhaps not be able to edit or delete any of the existing time entry screens that you have configured in your system. And so you have the option to break it out this way. In this particular case, I have my group admin who she has access to all 3 of those abilities. But that's entirely up to you to determine how you want to do that. Now, she can make modifications to the existing entry screens, or she can create new entry screens. She cannot give anybody access to her new entry screens except for the people in her groups, because that's how the time entry screens are assigned. So the important thing there is just that she may create time entry screens or expense entry screens, etc., for in the system, but she will only be able to grant access to them to the people in her groups. Another new ability, and this one was actually combined into one ability and has now been broken into 3, involves managing approval plans, time, expense, and mileage approval plans. So let's look at, compare this to our administrator. So again, the plans themselves are not group scoped. So my group admin can see all of the plans in the system. Just like the previous screen, I have the option to do create, edit, or delete, and so I don't have to give my group administrator abilities to do all 3 of those things. Now, the difference, again, here is who I can assign those plans to. So as my group admin, if I pull up an assign to user screen, I get 6 users because those are the ones who are in my group, versus a system administrator who's going to run the search and get all 31 users in the system. So again, I can create approval plans as a group administrator, but I can only assign those to the people in my groups. The next new ability involves managing time periods, and these are the periods that are set on your time, expense, and mileage entry screens, whether they're weekly or monthly or biweekly, and so on. Just as the previous 2 abilities were not group scoped, I'm going to be able to see as a group administrator all of the periods in the system. Periods are not modifiable, so there's no editability in this case. However, again, I can break it out by create or delete or both. So I can create my new periods for my group. But just as we saw with the approval plans, when I go to assign those, I'm only going to see 6. And of course, my system administrator is going to see all 31. So I can only assign any periods that I create to the people in my groups. Entry column management is also on the list of new abilities. And in this case, the values in the entry columns, for example, the values in our default activity column, are group scoped. So I'm only going to see the activities that are in my groups. So if we compare that here to a system administrator, we have a much longer activity list, whereas my group admin only has access to a few activities. Just like the others, the create, the modify, and the delete are 3 separate abilities. But in this case, I'm only going to be able to create values for my groups. I'm only going to be able to modify values that are in my groups. Now, of course, these could be shared. Other might be in more than just my groups. And I can only delete the values that are in my groups. But again, they can be shared. So use delete with caution. The ability to manage custom fields has also been added for our group administrators. Now, just like some of these others that we've looked at, custom fields don't belong to groups. So my group administrator is going to see all the custom fields in the system, just like those others. I have create, I have delete, I have modify. Now, one thing to note that while I can change the configuration of a custom field, and let's look at something like our user pay rate, which is always a sensitive field. So I can, change the description. I can change defaults and so on and so forth. It does not change who can view the actual values for individual, for if it's a user custom field, then for individual users. So as an example here, I have the user pay rate set up to only be visible to system administrators. So as a group administrator, when I go to look at one of the users that I manage, I do not see my user pay rate information in the system. And so that's an important note, that even though you can give them options to create custom fields for their groups, might be for their countries or divisions, if there's sensitive data that only system administrators should be able to see, then you have control here to ensure that the values aren't actually seen. So those are separate. Holiday schedules are another area where you can see all of the schedules in the system. But again, while you can add holidays to the schedules and delete holidays from the schedules if you have those abilities, you can only assign the schedules to your groups. So if you create a new schedule, for example, you're not going to be able to give that to groups outside of the ones that you control and belong to. And then again, this delete is an option. If you don't want them messing with other groups, holidays, other scheduled holidays, you can leave the delete option out of their ability list and just allow them to create. Now, the last new ability that I want to cover that's specific to our group admin is a new approver type. If you're familiar with our approver abilities, there's a regular approver and there's a super approver. And what we've added is a group approver. So a regular approver is somebody that has to belong to an approval plan. They have to be a designated approver in order to receive notice of submitted time and expense and mileage sheets under their approvals area. A super approver does not have to be a designated approver. They just get everything that's submitted, and that's what a system administrator has by default, and that's why they can see all approvals or all sheets pending approval, regardless of who they were submitted to. And the group approver is like the super approver in that she doesn't have to be the designated approver in any approval plan, but she's only going to see the sheets that were submitted by people in her groups. So as we can see, Steph is the approver for these sheets, so not our group administrator. But if we look at what's in the queue for our system administrator, there are 10 versus the 6. And so that's being filtered for the people that the group administrator is able to see via her groups. So group approver is a new type of approver ability that it kind of is in between the regular approver and the super approver. And that pretty much covers what we've done for group administrators. Now we have added a couple of other abilities that are worth noting. First of all, I'll go ahead and we added an ability to remove the records section under management from manager and other types. This used to be hard coded as part of the manager authority. You could not remove this access. And this is where you have the ability to create and modify records kind of outside of the whole sheet and workflow of approvals. And so a lot of times people didn't want managers to have access to this. And we can see that I took it away from our group administrator. So records is no longer available. But this is basically for kind of mass entries or many times making corrections to something that was done incorrectly that can't be done as a regular part of the corrections and sheet process. So the records management is now a distinct ability that can be removed from manager accounts. And then the last thing to mention are two abilities that allow you to protect the username or login names of the people in the system. And this is especially good for people who are tying third-party integrations to those usernames or login names, or maybe they're even populated by the third-party integrations, and you don't want managers editing either their own login and username or their the users that they manage. And so for my group admin, I left open the ability to change usernames for the users that she manages, but I turned off the ability for her to change her own. And so that's just an example of what those abilities do. And it just gives some added protection so that things aren't inadvertently changed in the system by people who haven't been properly trained and so on. And that pretty much covers our rollability improvements. So we'll go ahead and move on to the miscellaneous. First and foremost is some added information to our user system report. This is kind of metadata on logins. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Get all these fields selected. And so what we can see, we can track when people last logged in, so and kind of get an idea of how frequently people are using the system. We can also track anybody who's locked out of the system and know when they were locked out of the system. So that's helpful when users get into trouble and can't get into the system, especially if they don't report it and just aren't logging in. But it gives you a variety of information. That just like any system report, you can take this out to text and put it in spreadsheets and use it kind of any way that you want to. But it is some useful information on access to the system and lockout and password problems and that sort of thing. Another ad hoc feature is an additional email notification that we've added to our standard period approval plan. So these are our time, expense, and mileage approval plans for the sheet. And there is a new notification for approvers that basically is a reminder that they have approvals, that they have sheets in their queue to be approved, and they haven't approved them yet. And this can be set, this is another one of those email notifications that depends on days after the end of the period. So if you want to make sure that your approvers all have, their approvals done 5 days after the period, then you can set that to 5 days, turn on this notification, and it'll send out a reminder to anyone who has not approved all of their sheets by the end of that 5 days. So it's just another way to make sure that you keep your approval process flowing and get your approvals done in a timely manner. We also have some new import tools in the 9.0 release, and they are for your rate rules and policies. This is particularly helpful, I think, it can be helpful in setting up new rate rules, but also if you are maintaining rules where you have to add new projects on a regular basis for special, cost or billing markups, then this makes it a lot easier to maintain an Excel file where you can just go and add that project and import it. You can even schedule it to check for that Excel file and changes, on a regular basis. Just like all of our other import tools, there are sample files that you can use that will show you exactly what format that you need to use, and then an Excel file that you can use to set up your rules and policies and import them. Some small improvements to group management, but it may make a world of difference. For reasons that I'm not even entirely sure of, back when this was originally designed, the name of the group could not be modified when modifying the rest of your group characteristics. So we have added the ability to change the name of a group. We've also added the copy settings feature when you're creating a new group. And just like creating a custom role that has a long list of abilities where you just want to remove one or just add one, the group copy settings is equally useful when you have a group that you want to replicate and change something minor. The copy settings makes it easy for you to take a group, create another one, and then make the small changes that you need rather than having to manually recreate them. So that's a nice new feature. We're down to just the last two things that I want to show today. On the timekeeping screen, you will notice a new option under your search filters, and it's a display options select box. Now, I do want to mention that this is a prototype and will probably not look exactly like this in 9.1, but we implemented this in part for performance issues on the timekeeping screen. So we needed to go ahead and roll it out, and I think it'll be a good way to preview what's coming on all of your management screens in the next 9.x release. So what it allows you to do is control the fields that you see in the search results for timekeeping. And as you can see, I already have it set to what I want to see, just time and expense and email addresses. This is standard for timekeeping right now, that we show the period dates for any sheets that have been created where users have been entering their time. But the abbreviated view, should you be one of those people who are having trouble with any kind of load issues on timekeeping, reduces it to something a lot simpler with just a view link. And so if you do happen to be having performance issues on this screen, this abbreviated view will allow you to load it much more quickly. But you can also go customize your choices with whatever information you want to see, whatever makes it more helpful. Now, these right now are the only options for display. As part of the UI improvements for the next 9.x release, there will be more options than simply the default fields that were here originally, and this will be rolled out to all of your management screens. Another feature of this that's worth noting is that should I navigate away and come back, my selections were preserved. So I wanted that this is basically a preview. This is available for timekeeping in 9.0, but you can expect more control like this over your management screens in the upcoming 9 releases. The last thing I'm going to show today is specific to Project Execute. It's just a small customization feature that helps with what is a fairly complex looking screen, the My Assignment screen. And this is what the end users in Project Execute can use, but either in tandem or in lieu of the regular time entry screen, to manage all of their assignments. And it does have a lot of information on it, but one of the pieces of information that is only used occasionally is this progress on week plan. And the idea here is it shows the pace you have to work at each week to finish on time. However, most people have assignments that last for quite a bit longer than just a week or two. And so that information wasn't all that helpful for most people. They didn't need that pace information. So what we added, and this is where each end user can do this themselves, they can just turn that week plan off. So it's an additional My Assignments feature in addition to grouping your assignments by project and summary. And that helps to remove some of that information so that you just see what is most useful to you. The default for any new customers would have the week plan turned off. But if you are just upgrading to 9.0 from a previous release, then it's something you might want to let your end users know that they can turn off if you or they would find that useful. So that brings us to the conclusion of our 9.0 features. If you'll look here on my closing slide, it has the location for the upgraders guide. And of course, you're welcome to drop me an email, Brian Maxon, anybody else at Journyx, to find out where it is if you have any difficulty locating it. But the 9.0 upgraders guide will have information that covers everything that I talked about here today, how to find it, how to set it, etc. So please feel free to pull that if you need it. We will also be sending you a recording of this webinar, so you should have all the information you need to look back should you require it for reference. So this time I'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions. So Ken is asking, for Q&A, is there a list of the system administrator only abilities? I don't have a distinct list of what is still only available to system administrators, but I can do that very quickly and add that to the upgraders guide if that'll be helpful. So I'll just go ahead and plan to do that. Another question from Ken, isn't allowing group administrators access to the approval plans a bit risky? It could. The answer to that is it could be. Let me mention something that may not be familiar to everybody here, but most people who have this group admin issue right now are making these people system administrators. So we're reducing the riskiness by creating the group admin ability. But the easiest way to ensure that it's not risky is to only give your group admins approval plan create abilities. So you wouldn't give them the modify or delete abilities if that is a concern. If you think that training would not suffice to ensure that they don't go and change other groups' approval plans. If you only give them the create ability, there should be absolutely no risk because they can't change anyone else's, they can't delete anyone else's, and they can only assign those new plans to their groups. So I think that's how you would alleviate that risk if you had concerns about that. I'm glad that you think the user system report is very cool. Let's see. So Donna asks, is there a way to lock the time records so that they cannot be modified by anyone after we have billed for that time? There's no way to completely lock a record from having a system administrator manipulate it. If you were going to sync that record to a third-party system, then then you can track by what has been synced, and then it can't be changed. However, even if a system administrator were to go and change a fully approved record in your system, the change is going to be logged as a change record. So the original record is provided you have the proper settings, and Donna, I can get you the system settings that you would need to ensure this. As long as you have the proper settings in place, you would never ever be editing the original record, so the one you've billed. So what you could then do, should anybody happen to be modifying records after they've gone through the full approval process, is you could pull a report of the changes only, and use those as needed if you need a corrected billing or whatever the case may be. But there's not any way to completely block editing of the records by a system administrator. Certainly, they can be blocked from editing by anybody else, but it's all tracked. Should a system administrator do anything to an approved record, it's all going to be tracked in the system. You'll be able to report on it, and the original record will not be touched. And last question is, can we get a copy of this recording? Absolutely. We will be sending out, I think Krista will probably be sending out thank you emails with a link to a copy of this recording. If not, I will make sure that that happens. And as I mentioned, I'll go ahead and add to the Upgraders Guide a list of abilities and access that are still reserved for system administrators only. So do we have any other questions at this time? Let's see. Jenny is asking what the upgrade path is from 8.7, and it is strictly a patch upgrade. So it's a fairly simple process. You'll need to talk to your account manager for new this does require a new license key. It is a major upgrade. So you'll need to talk to your account manager about new license keys and any costs associated. I know sometimes it depends on when you purchased and what version you're running and so on, but your account managers can, Brian Maxon primarily, can help you with that. But it is a very simple upgrade process from 8.x, and even if you're on 7.9, you can patch up to 9.0, and it's fairly painless. You will probably have to do a backup and restore, but and then we have a question about downloading the release. We'll include those in the follow-up email with the copy of the recording, because as I mentioned, we will have to issue keys, and so we'll want to make sure we coordinate with your account managers to get those temp keys out if you want to test it, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. But we will go ahead and make sure that we include the download information or contact information for your account managers when we send the recording. Any other questions? Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you got all the information that you needed. If not, like I said, most of you, I think, have my direct email address. If not, it's meredith@journyx.com. Feel free to contact me if you need anything. And I should have the updates that Ken mentioned to the Upgraders Guide live later this afternoon in the customer community. If you want to wait till tomorrow, I'll definitely have it up and ready to go. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon.